Today I'll tell you about the cartoon monsters vs. aliens. Give us a like if you enjoy our videos. In the vast expanses of space, many unusual things happen. Even entire planets explode. And this time, the celestial body exploded with such force that one piece of it landed all the way on Earth. It was detected as it approached by Polar Station staff monitoring alien activity, or rather, inactivity, since it was the first unidentified object they had ever seen. According to their calculations, the UFO should land in the town of Modesta. Government agencies are dispatched there to intercept the visitor from outer space. At that moment, Susan Murphy was preparing for her wedding in Modesta. She's marrying weatherman Derek. He's a narcissistic careerist, but he and Susan share similar interests. They're both excited about the upcoming wedding. However, it is not destined to happen. A piece of an unknown planet falls directly on Susan, but she does not die. She absorbs the green glow of the meteorite and returns to the church. During the ceremony, her skin begins to glow, and then Susan grows in size. She smashes her head through the church and scares away all the guests. As Susan tries to save Derek, soldiers appear and arrest her. She woke up in a secret government base. General Voyager met her and explained that she would never return to her normal life. From that day on, Susan would live locked away with the other monsters. At this base, she meets a mad scientist who transformed himself into a cockroach to become indestructible. She also meets the experiment's victim, a gelatinous substance named Bob, and the missing link, an ancient half-human found in the ice. Also at this base is a creature larger than Susan, an insect brew. He grew so huge after receiving an adult dose of radiation. A chamber with a poster of a kitten was also prepared for Susan. Now she's one of them. She was even given a monstrous named Gigantica. Meanwhile, a spaceship carrying a cephalopod named Galactizer drifted in the depths of space. The onboard computer had discovered a substance called quantonium, which it had long been searching for. This substance, which grants incredible power, landed on Earth and landed right on Susan's head. Galactizer sent his robot there to extract the quantonium at any cost. The robot lands, and the event causes a great stir. Even the US president arrives to establish contact with the alien. When he approaches this relative of Plankton from the SpongeBob SquarePants cartoon, the robot becomes aggressive. First, it destroys the synthesizer the president was playing, and then tries to destroy him. But the head of state bravely escapes by helicopter. One-Eyed is attacked with all weapons, but he is protected by an impenetrable force field. Then the soldiers bravely flee the battlefield. The president calls an emergency meeting, which begins with a cup of coffee. To make the coffee machine requires pressing a button. The same button launches nuclear missiles, and the president constantly confuses them. Having figured out the buttons, he listens to the warrior's idea. He suggests unleashing his monsters against the robot. They'll smash the piece of metal to pieces. With no other ideas, the warrior is given the green light. Meanwhile, the monsters are having a good time together. Susan allowed Dr. Cockroach to conduct shrinking experiments on her, but none of them were successful. Despite this, Susan doesn't lose hope of becoming normal again and bringing Derek back. At that moment, the warrior announces that a job has become available. They just need to fly to San Francisco and destroy a giant alien robot. After that, they'll be allowed to see their families and simply live outside the secret base. However, Susan has never been brave. She's afraid of this robot, and the monsters suggest she hide in the deserted city. But the alien robot scanned her and discovered quantonium in her system. It didn't even notice the other monsters and went after Susan. Link and Bob tried to stop it, but to no avail. Meanwhile, the cockroach assembled rocket engines and chased the alien, putting Link and Bob on board. Susan donned cars instead of roller skates and raced toward the Golden Gate Bridge. There, a traffic jam formed, and she was forced to stop. The robot attacked her, but she was protected by the insect Zabber. He and the giant were the same size, and Susan herself was no slouch. She proved to be very strong and managed to save the people left on the bridge. While they were fighting, a cockroach crawled into the robot's head and tried to knock it out, but it failed. Eventually, the robot was knocked down, its head severed by a bridge support. Galactizer saw this and decided to capture Susan himself. He steered his ship toward the ground. After the battle with the robot, Susan was elated. She finally felt empowered and could stand up for herself. The military brought the whole gang to her parents' house so they could meet Derek. But Susan's parents weren't thrilled to see monsters on their lawn. They threw a party that evening, but the monsters scared off all the guests. Meanwhile, Susan picked Derek up from work. She simply broke a window and dragged him out into the street. But Derek didn't want to see her again. He explained that they were no longer a couple and had to break up. Susan was hurt. She was upset, and the only people who supported her were her monster friends. They were certain they would never be accepted into society. They would forever remain outcasts. However, this didn't bother Susan in the least. She finally realized that her happiness didn't depend on Derek, and her new friends were simply wonderful. They were brave, strong, and a little crazy. Susan didn't want to go back to the way she had been. She fell in love with herself just the way she was. And at that moment, an alien beam grabbed her and lifted her into the air. Her friends tried to stop her, but to no avail. Even the insect got its share. It was finished off with a blast from an energy cannon. Susan woke up on Galactazer's ship, wearing new clothes. The cephalopod trapped her in an energy cage and planned to drain her of the Quantonium. But Susan wasn't about to give up so easily. She broke out of the cage and chased Galactazer, breaking through the strongest barriers. He lured her into a Quantonium extraction device and took the substance. Susan became a normal human again. Galactazer began preparing to take over Earth. He destroyed his home planet and now had nowhere to live. So he crafted thousands of copies of himself, armed them, and planned to send them to Earth. But before that, he broadcast to the world and announced that he would soon exterminate virtually all of humanity. At that moment, the squad said goodbye to the Insectosaur, which had begun to form a cocoon, and decided to destroy the aliens. Voyager equipped him, the cockroach, and the bean with jetpacks and flew them to the alien ship. While he distracted the ship's computer, the monsters were able to get inside. The warrior nearly died, but still managed to land right on the insect. And at that moment, something began to hatch from the cocoon. Galactazer ordered his clone to take Susan to the disposal unit. She was rescued by her friends. They infiltrated the ship, disguised themselves as cephalopods, and passed themselves off as their own. The Galactazer copy voluntarily handed Susan over to them, and then the bean accidentally shot the alien. Reunited, the monsters come up with a way to stop the villain. They just need to blow up his ship before his clones can land on the planet. To do that, they'll need to damage the central power processor. Having discovered his location, the monsters accidentally shot the alien again, and their presence was exposed. A battle ensued between the cephalopods and the humans. The monsters managed to break through to the power processor. Dr. Cockroach cracked the control system's access code, and the computer began its self-destruct countdown. Upon learning of this, Galactazer ordered his escape pod prepared and Quantoni pumped into a special tank. He planned to escape, but Susan prevented him. She voluntarily shed the sphere of Quantonium and became enormous again. Now she asked to be called Gigantica. She rescued her friends from the collapsing ship, which exploded along with Galactazer. Gigantica and the other monsters were captured by Wayaker. He flew in on the Insectosaurus, which had now transformed into a butterfly. The planet was saved, and the people celebrated the monsters. Even Zveno received his share of public love. Derek appeared in the crowd. He was promised a position on national television if he interviewed Susan. He hoped she was still in love with him and wouldn't refuse. But Ginormica had no intention of returning to that jerk. She sent him on a long flight live on air, and Bob caught him on the ground. Derek left in disgrace, and the monsters set off on a new mission. Afterward, the president promoted Wayaker and called another meeting, during which he tried to pour coffee and pressed the wrong button. The country's entire nuclear arsenal was activated, and the president decided to freeze his brain and return to life in 500 years.